So in our restored prairie here, we have about 150 to 200 species of plants. We put in the wetland, there's probably another couple hundred different species of plants associated with the wetlands. So whenever we can bring the water features into the terrestrial features, they restore so much faster and we get such a bigger wildlife response. The waters in these wetlands were crystal clear till last week. At night, the deer have been coming and laying down in the water, and so they've been making it a little turbid. We've got common yarrow, which is a European plant that was brought here with pioneers. It has many home remedies, good for stomach ailments as such. Cultivated species will be in all kinds of different colors. They're just still relics of when this was an agricultural hay meadow or cornfield. This is prairie dock. You might also know it as elephant ear. Yeah. It is one of the silphiums, and that's the genus that these plants fall in. This is another silphium here called cup plant, and its leaves actually form a cup. When it rains, they'll be full of water for several days. Insects will drown, birds will drink, they'll eat the bugs. It's its own thing. It's one of the few plants that has a square stem. It's not a mint. Prairie dock and its other silphium, compass plant, which looks a lot like this except its leaf is deeply lobed, can live to be over 100 years old. Mm-hmm. I had a road crew working along the highway. I gave them a case of beer. They dug one up for me. The root went 15 feet into the ground. Had a tap about this big at the top. They're pulling up groundwater. And in the summer, leaves are evaporating. If you stick your hand down near any of these big clump silphiums, it's like you're putting your hand in an air conditioner. It's a noticeable lighter temperature due to the groundwater that's evaporating.
How many you want?
So we got quite a few things blooming right here. This plant on this side with the claspy leaves, almost sunflower-like, is the fourth silphium, and there are only 4 species. This one's called rosinweed. And if you were going to rosin your violin bow, you would be using the powdered stem of this plant. Over here we have wild white indigo. And these leaves are green now, but if we were to bruise them, by the time we got back to the building, they would be nearly black. Indians would have used these plants for dark dyes. It's a legume, so it has a pea flower, and it definitely has a pea pod with its seeds inside of it. They have a sticky substance on the outside of the seeds that ants prefer, and ants will move this plant all over the prairie. Common milkweed. I just saw a monarch fly by. It's blooming right here. The ones flying are the 3rd generation that's made it up from Texas. We've had monarchs here since May. And they're laying eggs. We've seen some caterpillars here already 3 inches big, which would be the 4th generation. The 5th generation will fly back to Mexico. We've got false sunflower blooming, and there are sunflowers with opposite leaves and alternate leaves, but this is the only composite that has an orange disc center, which makes it a little bit different and easier to identify. We have a slender leaf mountain mint, is the little white flower. And there's another type of mountain mint that just, when you walk through it, you're overcome with the smell of the mint. Lots of these plants, were used for teas and herbs. Ironweed. This is one of my favorite prairie plants called rattlesnake master. It's just bolting, and in another few weeks it'll start to flower. has these like inch and a quarter spherical, hard, round, spiky balls. And they're white. And there's certain beetles and other insects that just love them. Its Latin name is yuccafolium. And it gets its name because its leaves look like a yucca. They even have these little soft thorn protrusions coming out, much like a yucca. Indians thought if they powdered this root that they could tame rattlesnakes. And that's how it gets its name. They were wanting to see God. And let me tell you, this didn't help them tame the rattlesnake, but they probably saw God. So the purple one is bee balm or monarda. Grab a leaf and smell it. It's a mint. I would have powdered it and used it like an oregano. But there are 6 different species of monarda bee balm type plants, and we have 4 of them here. The white is the yarrow again. Wild garlic. It fruits little bulbs. Wild onion fruits these black shiny seeds, and so they're easy to tell apart when they're seeding. To this side we have hairy sunflower, and that's what this plant is here. It's a raspy leaf. When this blooms in about 3 weeks, it is the hottest light yellow of any flower in the prairie. It grows by rhizomes, so it makes these big patches, but it is just spectacular once it starts to bloom. Our oddity here is this grass out here. This is called June grass because it's blooming in June. I normally know this from the driest places up on top of hill prairies along the rivers, but we've got a few populations that it grows here. This is called reed canary grass. It's an exotic grass. It was brought here to help with cattle feeding cows. It loves wet feet. Whenever Lick Creek floods, it brings and reseeds a solid stand of reed canary grass. I've got the college kids out here, and I informed them that this plant could become a hallucinogenic if you consume enough of it. But it still persists. They haven't picked any of it. We have given up dealing with it, and I accept it in the first terrace off the creek. This fall, the only thing we found that we can compete with this grass are trees. And in the floodplain back here, one of our volunteers has planted about 3,000 trees. They grow up, they get tall enough, they can shade it out. This fall, we're going to plant that whole triangle from the wetland back to the creek, back to trees, just because we can't do anything else. You might have seen some brown spots around the wetlands as we walked. As it comes out of this first terrace, we're waging war on it, and we spend a lot of money and chemicals trying to keep bad plants out to make room for the good plants that we want. We will, though, have a little corner here of reed canary grass, just for your enjoyment. Prairie fires would have been devastating as they would have came up out of the south, and the sugar maple would have never been able to survive in the open prairie like that historically, unless it was in something as big as what they would have, like Funk's Grove, which was big enough to become a gallery forest, where it had a stream and maples along the stream with oaks that were surviving the fire on the outside. Most of the places like Carpenter Park and the timber that we know of burnt on a regular basis. Prairie fires, historically, you could have seen the sky glowing at night for 2 days before it got here. Even when we burn 300 acres at a time here, it sounds like a jet engine or a freight train. And it can develop its own speed to where there's times I can't outrun it. If I didn't have a cart, I would be consumed. But they had such intensity that they would jump the Sangamon River and keep going. But our timber, historic timber, they described as being open enough to drive a covered wagon through unobstructed. Due to the fires, you'd have trees about 100 feet or more apart, with prairie-type plants in between. And the early pioneers described them as very park-like, just from the setting. And that's what we try to recreate, or have places that we can still tell the story of what was Illinois before it became beans and corn. Sycamores, and this is a small one. At Carpenter Park, I have one that's hollow, and on the Friends website, there's a picture of me and 11 people inside of it. Along the Wabash River, where real trees grew historically, there they talk about pioneers, them being big enough and hollow, they could put 30 horses in one at night. They used them for corn silos and literally would stack ears of corn up in them. The Wabash River, if you ever get the chance, go to Bell Woods. It's this little 80-acre nature preserve of what the Wabash Valley used to be. And here we get about 2 tiers of trees. Small trees, big trees. There's a third level of trees. Giant trees above these. And I'll be walking through the woods and there'll be a wooden column of bark this big. I'll be 30 feet away from that to get a glimpse up to see its leaves. But big tulip trees, tulip poplar, white oak, their trees get almost 200 feet tall. That's why Vincennes is Vincennes. The French, they came there for center mast posts for the sailboats. But from the 1500s, people were logging the Wabash Valley. You truly, if you go there, you'll see that these are just scrubbed trees. Once you start to learn plants, then you start to learn odd plants. There are grasses and then there are sedges. Sedges have a triangular stem. There are 416 species of sedges in Illinois. When you're a botanist, you know flowers. When you know, after you've learned all the big pretty flowers, then you got to challenge yourself with grasses. And their stem is round. And so we can do this and kind of split the two little things apart. This one's called Bailey sedge. And it's ripening, it gets this beautiful rusty red tone. I'm supposed to be part Indian. My stomach knows it used to have been an Indian. And I try to look at things of what would they have eaten. But with these seeds, you could have made flour. And they're in abundance that you could get a handful off every stem. But I'm sure they would have ground this down and made bread or some sort of dough out of it. I'm dying to. There's a prairie Lespedezia, these little sticky flat seeds. If you go through the prairie in a month, will get stuck to you. If you peel that coating off, the seed inside is quite delectable. Same with silver maples. When the little helicopters come down, if you peel the helicopter off, I would love to get a bowl of them. So this is one of the drier spots out here. The grasses are shorter. We become giants in the prairie in these really dry spots. Prairie to the south and the prairie up here, it'll get 8 to 12 feet high depending on the summer. It can become claustrophobic. And then this spot, the plants will still stay just about this high the whole summer. So my wife, I met her studying hill prairies, which are on these really steep banks above the Illinois, in the Mississippi, and Sangamon. Grasses there might only get this tall. And so it's nice to be in an environment where you can at least be a giant.
What's this guy over here?
That's another of the white indigo. It's just a young one that has it. It's immature. A lot of these are perennials. So like the indigo usually takes 2 to 3 years from seed before it'll bloom. The compass plant and the prairie dock, 6 to 7 years from seed before they'll go to flower. I have some other ones, 10 to 15 years it takes for them to germinate. They're waiting for the right condition. A month ago, we had a plant out here called wood betony. And these are its leaves, and it has this beautiful yellow spiral tubular flower that bumblebees just go crazy for. On our website, I've got some slow-mo videos of bumblebees in it. We just picked seed from it 2 days ago. I only know this plant from a couple of those high and dry hill prairies I was talking about. It's a saprophyte, so it needs another plant that it grafts into. On the hill prairies, it's little blue stem. There is little blue stem growing. It would be the finer of the grasses right here, or it's probably using one of the other grasses out here. But it grafts into their roots, and so it's sucking life off of another plant. Not quite parasitic, which it would just survive it completely off, but it's pulling a large portion of its life out of another plant. Vampire plants. Black-eyed Susan, yellow with the brown center. And then butterfly milkweed. Hard to miss. Just starting to bloom out here. The wild quinine, the aspirin plant. One of the guys who taught me how to learn prairie plants is you have to use all of your senses. Feel it, smell it, tell me what it is. It has this really wild white cast to it. And so it sticks out when you see it in the prairie of that really light color. If you walk through it, you would be overcome by the fragrance of it. But the prairie is a smorgasbord. It's a pharmacy. It gives us all our plant fiber and dye. What more do we need? I've into the philosophy with a few of the people from the Nature Conservancy that habitat is about prairie structure. And a lot of restorations just get so much grass that the flowers are just overcome with grass around them. On the east side of the state at Prairie Ridge, where they have the Prairie Chicken Sanctuary, where they've been doing probably some of the oldest and neatest prairie restoration experiments, we're finding that the rare birds utilize these areas where the structure is unique. I did a study there for a couple of years, and I found 28 insects of great need of conservation utilize the same places due to this interface of the structure. If I'm a little moth and I'm looking for this plant, if it's grown in grasses all up, I can't get to the plant to lay my eggs. The rattlesnake master, I study and monitor a boring moth that was a federal candidate for listing of a federally endangered species. It hammers the plant in its life. The caterpillar will bore into the stem, go down and consume the root. Very dynamic population analysis where caterpillars I've documented in Oklahoma, plants 300 to 500 over a 4 or 5 year period. The caterpillars will hammer them down to about 25. Sometime in that period, though, fire comes through. The fire really reduces the eggs or the caterpillars of the moth, stimulates the seeds, and so we get a big flush of new seedling plants. The Nature Conservancy has this 36,000 acre site called the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve in Pawhuska. And I went there when they first started. It was a big cattle operation. They kept some cattle on to keep grazing occurring, and they started to introduce bison. I was out there to learn what insects were on the site. When the cows were there, the rattlesnake master would grow up, and if the cows didn't eat it, it would grow 3 feet tall and it would fall over and it might move 3 feet. Once the bison came in, if you look on a microscope, all of these prairie seeds have these little hooks and spurs in them, and they all evolved to hitch a ride in the prairie on the backs of bison. Wherever the bison would roll in dust to keep the bugs off, the next year I had rattlesnake master. When it was cows, I had 3 populations several miles apart, the big triangle I called it. And in the 5 years after the bison, the plants started showing up everywhere. I came from Illinois. I go, oh, you're going to need a greenhouse, and you're going to need seed. And they go, no, we're not going to do it that way here. They just brought bison. I had a small herd in Illinois, and I don't have enough land or high enough fence to keep bison. There used to be a farmer just west of Loami that had several of them. The best meat I've ever had. And I was trying to just get a hide so I could comb the seeds off of it. And they wanted, several $1,000s just for the hides. I've learned that it's the incredible things in the animals do most of this work. I have a photograph where there's just earth scrapers and bulldozers here when I built these wetlands. And I keep it because it's hard for me to remember those days. Much like Mary Lou's, she's seen a lot of big equipment in the short time of her project. I would have never thought this would have ended up like this. But at the same time, as soon as there was water and the bulldozer would be through, there were dragonflies laying eggs. Nature is coming to these places, and build it and they will come. This should be our theme. I should have t-shirts for sale up here. But this year our big thing was breeding bobcats. Oh. And so every year there's something big. When we first started, we had albino deer here for a long time. But there's always something big happening here as far as targets for us. We know we're doing the right thing. This week, you're about the 300th people I've had on a tour in the past 5 days. But everyone's hearing about it. We're getting really recognized, and people are coming out to take it to see what we've got. We're here. It's open sunrise to sunset. Membership to the Friends of Sangamon Valley, visit our Facebook page or our website, PayPal, we can make it real easy. The memberships are what fund the Friends of the Sangamon Valley. We replicate this story on many other parcels throughout the 9 counties surrounding Sangamon County. Mary Lou's is just one of them. She's leaving property to us in her will of land we're helping her restore. I just started a new one north of Sherman this week where John Frazee removed all these small junk trees for me, doing the same thing. I've created a small wetland and 2 large prairies for that member. But we work, and if you're interested, let us know. I'm happy to let you come out here and we will help you. If you want to do a prairie, we have seed collecting days starting the rest of the summer. You pick seed for us, we'll give you seed.
Wow, that's really, yeah, sure.
Some of this stuff, as I said, is as expensive as gold. The nippers gave us the option, the capacity to bring a lot of that material here. We collect this material and bring it everywhere else. And so this is just one of the things that we can do out here. But call us, we're easy to get. I'm on Facebook, the Friends are on Facebook, Nipper's on Facebook. Mary Lou's even on Facebook.
What's the website?
The website is
TheFoSV.org.
If you hit that, it'll all get there.
FOSV, Friends of Sangamon Valley.org.
Any questions? This is the clubhouse turn.